Hello everyone, and welcome back to this edition of our Hunter Apprenticeship series. We're in for another bit of a gear review. Arrow setup today is what we're going to be talking about. Just make sure you go ahead, click that subscribe button and the like button, and if you have any questions or comments during the video, feel free to drop them in there and we'll do our best to answer those for you. Okay, so today we're going to talk about hunting arrow setup, and I have both of my hunting arrow setups here with the Stix arrows, and we're both micro diameter, but they are different diameters, and I'm going to talk about why that is in just a moment here. So the types of arrows we're using today here are the micro LTs and the Ventilator series shafts here from Stix. So recently, I've kind of got more into a bit more of the nano diameter arrows versus the typical 244 shafts, and just looking at different areas on penetration, weight, speed, and things like that. So we'll do a little math here in a second, and I'll show you why. So we'll start here with the micro LTs. And you can see here, this one still has the broadhead on it here. And so my hunting shafts are 28 and 3/4 inch long. So hunting shaft length will vary depending on your draw length, first and foremost, because you don't want to have too short of an arrow that's not going to stay on your rest. And too long of an arrow can just add extra weight and reduce some speed depending on the grains per inch of that arrow. So too long, too short can definitely play a factor in speed, but more importantly, you want spine selection. So they have a great chart on the Stix website, and typically for my draw length and weight, and I'll just put a link in the video here to go back to my bow hunting bow setup, and you can check that video out. Now, with a 30.5 inch draw length and a 61 pound draw, I fall into the 350 spine. So if you're unfamiliar with spine, it is the stiffness and flex of the arrow. So the higher poundage, longer draw length, all that factors into having to have a stiffer spine so that the arrow can absorb that energy and exit the bow properly to gain flight stabilization or not to shatter. Too light of a spine is definitely dangerous. You can go too heavy of a spine and get away with it. You may run into some tuning issues, but you can get away with it. But you definitely don't want to have too light of a spine. So 350 spine works very perfectly for my current setup. So both shafts are in that. Now you'll notice here, if I put these side by side, that if you're looking at it from our top angle that we have here as well, that the diameters are in fact different. So the micro LT is a smaller shaft and the Ventilator is a slightly larger shaft. So Ventilator is 0.35, 1 of an inch in diameter, and the micro LT is a 0.229. So it is quite a bit smaller than the Ventilator. I'll just put these to the side here. Use these. Just gonna remove the broadhead so I don't stab myself. We do have first aid kits on site, FYI. Okay, so now when we're looking at, so we just talked about spine selection, we talked a little bit about arrow length. I keep my arrows the same shaft length. I know these don't look the same length compared to their outserts, but that's just because they have different outserts for the shafts. But in fact, the carbon to carbon length is the same. Okay, so moving on to FOC. So I'm gonna grab one here that has a field tip on it so that we're the same. So FOC is the center focus of the arrow on where the weight of that arrow is distributed. So if I go here, So FOC is your balance point. So as you can see, it's front of center. So center of the shaft would be somewhere in this range here. So I'm not going to give you an exact percentage because I don't have that with me. But if I were to be a guessing man, I'd probably say it's somewhere in that 15% range there. So we'll go to the ventilator as well. So again, center shaft, I would say my FOC is roughly in the same spot with both shafts, which is great, and that's probably why it was fairly easy to tune them both back and forth when I switch back and forth. Now, definitely to note with FOC, so front of center, if you have a really high FOC, so if your FOC is quite a bit more to the front of your arrow than the middle, so you start getting over that kind of 20%, 25% mark, it starts to weaken your spine, which will greatly reduce your flight efficiency of the arrows, because your arrow flexes coming out of the bow and then it slowly stabilizes. So if you weaken that spine, the stabilization of the arrow will have a harder time achieving that, and then your flight will affect that as well, which in turn affects your accuracy. Okay, so now we want to talk about fletching. I use a typical 3 fletch. And as you'll see down the center of that there, they have a bit of a twist to them. That's called a helical twist. I find that it does spin the arrow a little bit more and does help with flight stabilization. Now, too much helical can definitely increase the drag, which will slow your speed down, but you may find it might stabilize your arrow. So that's where you have to come and decide, accuracy versus speed. Everybody has that argument. Okay. So now we're going through that, and we're going to talk, and we're going to get into some math, okay? And the math is important because kinetic energy of the arrow and momentum of the arrow have to do with penetration. So size of diameter between the ventilator and the micro LT. So smaller diameter, so my broadhead will create a hole in the target. Smaller diameter, less chance of it touching the sides, less drag, bit better penetration. Now, my ventilator arrow is 425 grains all in. My micro LT arrow is 380 grains all in. So with bearing that in mind, I get better speed out of my micro LT than I do out of my ventilator. But I get better momentum out of my ventilator than I do out of my micro LT. And why is that important? So I'm going to explain why that's important. So kinetic energy is close to the same. I just used an online calculator. The micro LT has about 92 joules, and this ventilator has about 89 joules coming out of the bow. Okay, obviously that slightly decreases as your arrow slows down. However, momentum has to do with influencing penetration because it's the amount of energy that your arrow continues to hold into the target. So momentum-wise, my ventilator has 2,221 kilograms per meter per second, and the micro LT has 2,136. So we almost have 100 kilogram meters per second difference between the two arrows. So what that means is I'm going on a larger target, I'm going to have better energy penetration, momentum penetration with the ventilator than the micro LT. So I'm probably gonna, for moose and elk, I'm gonna take my ventilator. For bear, deer, and other game, I'm gonna use my micro LT. Why? My micro LT is faster. I still carry good momentum, I still carry good energy. But with deer and you could use it on elk too, but especially deer, they would do what's called jump string. They can actually get out of the way of your arrow by hearing the bow. So having a bit of a fast speed advantage with your arrow will help you in target accuracy. Now, if you have a moose, elk don't jump string that much, but larger game animals don't tend to flinch as hard with a sound. So I'm going to choose this one because I'm going to have better penetration with my momentum of this arrow. So I hope that makes sense. Do the math on your own arrows, but keep in mind that momentum and kinetic energy are different. Momentum is what holds the energy into the target. That is important for penetration, not just speed. Okay, so I'm glad we got that out. And we talked about different species require different arrow setups. So even though my weight is different, with my bow hunting setup, it does not take, it takes me a short afternoon to retune between the two arrows. So if you're worried about, I need a one size fits all arrow, sure. If you need a one size fits all arrow, they're out there. Kill and Stix has a great selection of them, but I mean, on the whole, if I had to go with it, I would probably pick the micro LT just because it's smaller diameter, and that might give me an advantage on penetration, even though I have less momentum. But I have the option of the two, so I'll just tune between the two, and it's not a huge deal for me. But it is important to keep that fact in mind when you're choosing and selecting arrows based on the species that you're hunting, that don't just assume one arrow is a one size fits all. That's why arrow companies have multiple selections of arrows, because they do have uses for different species that may benefit you, increase your ethical kill ability, and or you need some more speed, or what works best for your bow. That tunes really easy, really well. That's not a bad thing. If you just can't tune other arrows and you're finding that one particular arrow just tunes really well and you're super accurate, to me that's what matters the most, is that your arrow is hitting where you need it to hit every single time. So a little bit of information, maybe a lot for some of you. Do the math, weigh your arrows, figure out what species you're hunting with them, select the right one. And if you have any questions, again, leave them in the comment. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned something. And yeah, this is just another edition on The Hunter Apprentice. There's lots of other videos that we have coming out in that series, so make sure you check that out. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.